in the quiet desert community of Sagewood Estates, nestled on the outskirts of Tucson, Arizona, Lucas Ramirez, a 42-year-old contractor, was just trying to live a peaceful life with his wife Emily, a nurse, and their teenage daughter Lila. But peace wasn't easy to come by under the thumb of their tyrannical HOA president, Catherine Monroe, a woman whose pink clipboard wielded more fear than reason. For years, Catherine's reign had been one of relentless inspections and absurd fines. From mailbox heights to flower colors, no detail escaped her scrutiny. But it wasn't until Lucas found a bright orange violation notice taped to his front door, demanding a $500 monthly fee for having excessive vehicles in his own driveway, that he realized things had gone too far. 3 cars. That's what sparked this war. His work truck, Emily's hospital SUV, and Lila's birthday gift. A used sedan. What Catherine didn't know, however, was that Lucas had been preparing for this battle for 5 years, quietly purchasing properties in the neighborhood through various LLCs. He never wanted power, but now he held the majority stake in the HOA. And tonight, at the emergency meeting she called, Catherine would find out who truly controlled Sagewood Estates. Lucas Ramirez stared at the notice taped to his front door, the fluorescent orange paper flapping in the desert breeze. His jaw clenched. $500 per month for vehicle overage violations. Catherine Monroe had finally crossed the line. He stepped back inside, trying to stay calm as his wife Emily paced the living room. "She's out there again," she said, peeking through the blinds. "Taking pictures of Lila's car. Again." Lucas took a deep breath. "We've explained the garage is full. Your medical supplies, my tools. This isn't about cars. It's about control." Catherine, armed with her signature pink clipboard and a superiority complex the size of Arizona, had spent years bullying homeowners under the guise of community harmony. Roses too vibrant? Fine. Basketball hoops visible from the street? Violation. But this time, she wasn't just targeting aesthetics. She was targeting his family. What she didn't know was that Lucas had been quietly acquiring homes in Sagewood Estates for half a decade through his investment firm, Solara Property Group. Every time a resident moved out, usually from HOA harassment, he stepped in, using different holding companies to avoid suspicion. And last week, he'd hit the tipping point, 67% ownership. That afternoon, as Catherine strutted down the street, heels clacking and phone in hand, Lucas received a text from his attorney. "Property closing complete. You now hold the voting majority." A slow smile formed on his face. "It's time." Catherine called an emergency HOA meeting for that evening, hoping to push through stricter vehicle regulations, limiting homes to just 2 cars, garage-only parking, and escalating fines for non-compliance. It was her latest power play, and Lucas knew it was meant for him. He arrived early, setting up quietly in the back of the community center's meeting room. Maps, property deeds, legal folders, all neatly organized in his leather case. Neighbors trickled in, some loyal to Catherine, others weary of her tactics. Whispers filled the room. "Did you hear about the new rule? My son got a violation just for parking in our own driveway." Catherine tapped her glittering gavel at exactly 7 o'clock p.m. "Let's begin," she said, clicking through a slideshow filled with images of Lucas's driveway. As you can see, this property has become a vehicular eyesore, dragging down community standards. Lucas stayed silent, for now. Furthermore, Catherine continued, the board is proposing a vote on limiting each household to 2 vehicles, with mandatory garage storage. Anyone found in violation will be fined accordingly. Murmurs rippled across the crowd. That's when Lucas stood. "Point of order, Madam President," he said calmly, walking to the front. Catherine blinked. "You're not recognized. I believe, per HOA Bylaw 72.4, any member with majority ownership may raise a point regarding governance." He pulled out a folder. "And since Solara Property Group, under my direction, now owns 67% of homes in Sagewood Estates, I suggest we pause this vote. We need to discuss who really controls this HOA, and why your surveillance, selective enforcement, and questionable fees are about to face a full audit." The room exploded in whispers. Catherine turned pale, and for the first time in years, she had nothing to say. The meeting room went eerily silent after Lucas's declaration. Catherine Monroe's expression faltered as the reality of his words came in. 7% ownership. The pink gavel in her hand suddenly seemed like a toy. Her voice cracked slightly as she tried to recover. "That's impossible," she stammered. You've manipulated the system." "No," Lucas replied, keeping his voice measured. "I used the same system you've abused for years. The only difference is, I did it legally, and quietly." Murmurs spread like wildfire. A man in the second row whispered, "I knew something was off with all those empty houses being sold fast." An elderly woman clutched her purse tighter, nodding slowly. The tide was turning, but Catherine wasn't done yet. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped, her voice rising. "I'll be contacting our legal counsel." "You might want to hurry," Lucas interrupted, opening his briefcase. "Because what I'm about to show everyone might make you wish you had quit months ago." He pulled out a color-coded chart, an expense report covering 3 years of HOA spending. "Let's start with this. A $28,000 landscaping contract, awarded to your brother-in-law. A $15,000 community art project. That never happened. And the mysterious $1,100 for pool maintenance in a winter month when the pool was closed." Catherine's cheeks flushed deep red. "I don't see how any of this is relevant," she barked. "It's very relevant," Lucas said, now flipping to the next slide. "Because these charges came directly from the HOA's discretionary fund, paid for by residents who were fined for things like garden gnomes, mailbox flags, or having a car tire 1 inch over the driveway line." Gasps broke out around the room, but before Lucas could continue, the double doors at the back of the meeting room swung open. A reporter and camera crew from the local news station stepped inside. Lucas gave a knowing smile. "I thought it would be wise," he said, "to ensure transparency." Catherine's eyes widened in horror. "You invited the press?" Lucas nodded. "I figured the community deserved to hear what's really been going on. And now that they're here, let's talk about the surveillance footage I have of you, taking photos of residents' yards at 3:00 a.m., including elderly neighbors and teenage girls." The crowd's mood shifted from curiosity to outrage. Someone shouted, "That's harassment!" Another added, "My daughter said she saw her near our window last week." Still, Catherine fought back. "I won't be slandered like this. I've done nothing wrong." Lucas raised a single eyebrow. then nodded to Gerald Chen, a soft-spoken resident from the finance committee, who stood with a trembling sheet of paper in his hand. I have here a signed statement from 3 former board members, Gerald said, voice cracking, confirming Catherine pressured them to approve fees and violations based on personal vendettas. That was the final blow. The reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand. Ms. Monroe, would you care to comment? Catherine turned toward the exit, eyes burning, lips tight, but the door she had ruled behind for years had just been blown wide open. After the meeting erupted, and Catherine Monroe stormed out under the harsh light of local news cameras, Lucas Ramirez didn't feel triumphant. He felt the weight of what had just begun. The neighborhood wasn't just watching him now. They were counting on him. Back at home that night, Lucas sat at the kitchen table with his wife Emily, the soft hum of the desert wind drifting through the open window. He stared at the stack of property deeds, violation notices, and HOA financial records spread out before him. You started this to protect us, Emily said softly, pouring him a cup of tea. But now, this isn't just about us anymore, is it? Lucas shook his head. Not even close. For years, he had watched Catherine twist rules to her will, targeting veterans for flying flags, seniors for non-uniform porch furniture, and single parents for simply having too many guests. He had bought properties not to take over, but to create a layer of defense. Now he realized his secret shield had become a powerful tool for change. The next morning, Lucas did something Catherine never would. He knocked on doors. One by one, he introduced himself as the man behind Solera Property Group. He explained the ownership, the audit, the financial abuse. But more importantly, he listened to Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been fined $250 for drying laundry outside during the summer heat, to Mr. Patel, whose kids weren't allowed to ride their scooters on the sidewalk because it created noise pollution, to the Wongs, whose holiday decorations had been forcibly removed by HOA security for being too ethnic. Lucas took notes, shook hands, and apologized for not stepping forward sooner. By the end of the week, he had held a town hall, not behind closed doors like Catherine used to do, but outdoors, in the community park she'd once tried to pave over, for aesthetic reasons. Over 200 neighbors showed up, bringing lawn chairs, iced tea, and stories. Lucas stood on the makeshift stage and said what none of them expected. I don't want control. I want balance. I want an HOA that protects its people, not punishes them. One that hears your voices, not silences them. The crowd clapped. Some even cried. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the soul of Sagewood Estates, about building something rooted in respect, fairness, and community. He proposed a new system, clear guidelines written by residents, not dictators, financial transparency with quarterly public audits, a rotating board of elected neighbors from diverse backgrounds. And yes, you could have more than 2 cars, as long as they weren't parked on the lawn. Lucas watched as people who had once lived in fear now raised their hands to volunteer. Former critics were now allies. The same community that had been divided by one clipboard was uniting under one vision. He glanced at his daughter Lila, sitting beside Mrs. Rodriguez's grandson, both laughing and eating cookies baked by neighbors. That, right there, was the real victory. Within 2 weeks of that first open-air town hall, Sagewood Estates looked and felt completely different. Gone were the fear-based notices taped to doors. The late-night patrols with flashlights and measuring tape had stopped. And most importantly, neighbors who had once tiptoed around HOA rules were now talking, organizing, and finally smiling again. Lucas Ramirez was no longer seen as just the quiet contractor with the work truck. He had become something more, a bridge between what the community had endured and what it could become. His first order of business? Dismantle the outdated, fear-fueled system Catherine Monroe had spent years crafting. He and his newly assembled interim board, 5 volunteers representing different sections of the neighborhood, met every evening in the community center. And this time, everyone was invited. No more closed-door meetings, no more rushed votes, no more secret budgets. Lucas proposed a full rewrite of the HOA charter, and the residents, eager to participate, formed working groups. Retired teachers offered to draft the new bylaws. Local parents helped create a kid-friendly policy. Engineers from the tech corridor volunteered to develop a digital transparency platform where every homeowner could see how fees were spent. The most radical idea? A good neighbor credit system. Small discounts on HOA fees for volunteering in community projects. Gardening. Helping seniors with home maintenance, organizing events. For once, contributions mattered more than compliance. Emily, who had rarely attended past HOA meetings due to her hospital schedule, now led the Community Health and Safety Committee, organizing CPR classes and a free medical supply drive. Their daughter Lila started a weekend kids group that helped elderly residents weed gardens and clean up trash. But change wasn't just about new rules. It was also about righting old wrongs. Lucas worked with his lawyer to audit years of suspicious spending, launching an effort to reimburse improperly fined residents. They didn't have the funds to pay everyone back immediately, but they published a plan and a timeline showing every penny accounted for. That act alone restored more trust than any speech ever could. Still, the biggest challenge came when Lucas received a letter from Catherine Monroe's lawyer, accusing him of conducting a hostile takeover. He smiled. At the next community meeting, he read the letter aloud. Then he calmly replied, "This wasn't a takeover. It was a handback to the people this community belongs to." The crowd erupted in applause. 1 month later, with overwhelming support, the Sagewood Neighbors Association was formally recognized by the county as the new governing body. The old HOA officially dissolved, its name removed from every sign, document, and memory that mattered. Standing at the entrance of the neighborhood, Lucas helped install a new sign. It didn't say "no parking." It didn't list violations. It read, "Welcome to Sagewood, a community built by its people." And for the first time in a long time, everyone driving in felt like they truly belonged. The old Lucas Ramirez would have celebrated Catherine Monroe's downfall with a cold beer and a private grin. But the new Lucas, the man shaped by long nights reviewing HOA financial records, neighborhood meetings under string lights, and heartfelt conversations with elderly residents, didn't feel victorious. He felt responsible, sitting alone on the porch of his home one evening, the Arizona dusk painting the sky in streaks of coral and violet. Lucas sipped tea instead of beer. His work truck sat proudly in the driveway, next to Emily's SUV and Lila's now slightly beat-up Honda, the cars that had started it all. "I didn't change this place," he whispered to himself, watching neighbors wave at each other from driveways and walk their dogs without fear. "We did." Lucas had always been a quiet fighter, someone who kept his cards close, someone who let strategy speak louder than arguments. But Sagewood Estates had drawn something else out of him. A voice, a sense of purpose, a fire that didn't burn with rage, but with resolve. His transformation wasn't just about gaining power. It was about learning to use it with care. There were moments of doubt, of course. One night, after a long board meeting filled with passionate disagreements over community garden rules, Lucas had returned home exhausted. "Why did I get into this?" he asked Emily, burying his face in his hands. She sat beside him, gently pulling his hands away. "Because you couldn't let one bully define where we live, or who we are. You didn't start this for power, Lucas. You started it for peace." That word lingered with him for days. Peace didn't mean silence. It didn't mean submission. It meant fairness, transparency, community. Lucas embraced his role as more than just a board chair. He became a mentor. He encouraged teens to join monthly meetings, inviting them to suggest ideas. He launched a Neighbor Helping Neighbor program, where skilled residents offered their expertise, carpentry, tutoring, computer help, for free. He helped start a fund that assisted homeowners in need with small repairs, supported by voluntary contributions. He no longer carried stacks of legal documents to every meeting. Now, he carried a notebook filled with ideas and feedback from residents he'd spoken with during his evening walks. Catherine's reign had built walls. Lucas's leadership built bridges. And that was the real victory. Not the legal triumph, not the news coverage, not even the rise in property value. It was the evolution of a man who went from being pushed around to lifting others up. One afternoon, as Lucas helped Mrs. Patel hang wind chimes on her porch, a violation under the old regime, he looked out at the transformed neighborhood. Lila ran by with her friends, laughing, waving. Mr. Pin tended his now blooming, too exotic garden. Emily waved from across the street, holding a clipboard filled with plans for the new community wellness center. Lucas smiled. He hadn't just fought for a driveway. He had built something far bigger than himself. A year had passed since the last time anyone in Sagewood Estates had received a violation notice for a flag, a flower, or a car. What once was a neighborhood ruled by pettiness and fear had transformed into a living, breathing example of what a real community could be. And at the heart of that transformation stood Lucas Ramirez, not as a figurehead, but as a humble neighbor, mentor, and friend. On a crisp Saturday morning, Lucas stood at the entrance of the newly completed Sagewood Community Pavilion, the very site where Catherine Monroe had once tried to build a guest surveillance booth. Now, it was a shared space filled with laughter, fresh coffee, garden tools, and the joyful chaos of children playing. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest. Lucas didn't want speeches. He wanted conversations. Emily stood beside him, her arm looped through his, smiling with quiet pride. Lila was passing out homemade muffins with the neighborhood kids and former enemies of the old regime, like Mr. Hollis, once a strict rule enforcer, now sat on picnic benches discussing ideas for a spring block party. When someone from the local news station asked Lucas for a final quote for their follow-up segment, he paused. Then he said, "I think we forgot somewhere along the way that HOAs were supposed to protect our homes, not control our lives. All we really needed was a reminder that people come first. The paperwork should follow them, not the other way around." The reporter smiled, caught off guard by the simplicity and power of that answer. That afternoon, a small group of new residents toured the neighborhood with their realtor. One of them pointed at a cheerful handmade sign near the front entrance that read, "Welcome to Sagewood, where neighbors make the rules, not fear." Lucas overheard them. "This feels warm," one said, "like people actually live here." And that was it. The success of Sagewood Estates wasn't just legal or financial, though property values had jumped 15%, and HOA satisfaction had hit an all-time high. It was cultural, emotional, human. Lucas's final act, as the de facto leader of the transition committee, was to formally resign from the board. "I was never meant to run this forever," he told the crowd at his last meeting. "I just wanted to open the door. It's yours now." The new board was elected that night. 5 residents chosen not for who they knew, but for how they listened. As Lucas walked back home, under the glow of the community's newly installed solar streetlights, part of an initiative suggested by high schoolers, he passed homes decorated in every color, driveways filled with life, and porches adorned with wind chimes, potted plants, and laughter. He stopped at his mailbox, opened it, and found a handwritten card from Mrs. Rodriguez. "You didn't just save our homes. You gave us back our voices." Lucas smiled, tucked the card into his pocket, and looked up at the sky. Sometimes the loudest victories don't come from shouting. They come from showing others what freedom really looks like. True power doesn't come from authority. It comes from integrity, empathy, and the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. Lucas Ramirez never set out to be a leader. He was just a father trying to protect his family from an unjust system. But when the rules became weapons, and the enforcers became bullies, he chose not to fight with anger, but with strategy, patience, and principle. He didn't just defeat a corrupt HOA president. He replaced fear with fairness, and isolation with community. In doing so, he reminded his neighbors, and all of us, that one determined person can shift the course of an entire neighborhood. The lesson? Don't underestimate the quiet ones. Don't overlook the power of small, consistent action. And most importantly, when people come together for the right reasons, they can build something stronger than any rulebook. Belonging. If you live in a community dominated by an aggressive or unfair HOA, you're not powerless. Start by documenting everything: violations, inconsistencies, and financial decisions. Check your HOA's bylaws and your rights as a property owner. Use public records to investigate questionable spending. Attend meetings or send a proxy. Form alliances with neighbors who share your concerns. If necessary, consult a real estate attorney or a local journalist. Transparency is your greatest tool. Unity is your greatest weapon. You don't have to destroy the system. Just return it to its original purpose, protecting homeowners, not punishing them.